Welcome. We're so glad to have you join us today. My name is Braden Savage, and I'm the Director of Alt Ed here at the State Department. And I would like to introduce to you today Ryan Abernathy. He is from the Regional Food Bank of Oklahoma, and he was going to be discussing resources and services that his organization can provide to meet the needs of the students that you serve in your program. So Ryan, you ready to take it away?
Sure, Braden. Always happy to do that. Really good to join you today that are joining us and others that will join and listen later on. As Gary has warned me, this is being recorded for posterity, which is always incredibly frightening. That means anything I say can and will probably be used against me at some place and point in time. So it is good to be able to be here with you today. I have been working at the Regional Food Bank for going on 9 years now, and all but about 6 months of that has been in the area of childhood hunger. And I want to spend some time today discussing food insecurity, what that looks like, how to identify it, provide you with some information on the different resources that are available to schools here in Oklahoma, both in school and out of school. And then also provide you with some information that I'll actually place in the chat box towards the end of ways that you can reach out to resources to help families that are in your schools. Because the truth of the matter is a child who is food insecure is most likely from a family that's food insecure. And just because we're helping the child does not mean that we're necessarily working to alleviate the situation. And that's something that we always want to do if at all possible. So I want to start off today talking about the subject of food insecurity, what it is, because it's a term that's become kind of a buzzwordy term across different spectrums and agencies in the United States and in Oklahoma. And it's a word that a lot of people don't understand, because a lot of people, when you say food insecure, they associate that with someone who is accessing a federal program, and that is in no way, shape, or form the case. Food insecurity is typically defined as the state of being without reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable or nutritious food. But the truth of the matter is, the easier definition is to say someone is food insecure if they are in danger or feel in danger of missing one of 3 meals in the course of a day. Not because they're trying to lose weight, not because they don't have time to stop and eat the way many of us are, but because there are not sufficient resources either in the home or in their pocketbook in order to be able to provide a meal for themselves or for their family. So that means that, for example, someone who's accessing food stamps, what we call a SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, most likely isn't food insecure. That SNAP benefit is providing a food resource for them that allows them to be able to supplement what they're able to earn or what they're able to bring in through disability or child support or different things like that. People that are on food stamps are often not food insecure precisely because they're accessing the program. Another common mistake is we assume that someone is food insecure because they're accessing the free and reduced lunch program inside of our schools. We get that a lot in our school-based programs, where somebody will say, we'll ask a school, how many people do you need to assign to the backpack program, or do you anticipate accessing a school pantry? And they'll say, well, we have 200 kids on our free and reduced price lunch in our school. I guess all 200 of them. And the truth of the matter is, that's often not true. Typically, because that child is accessing free and reduced price lunch, they are food secure because mom and dad don't have to pay for breakfast. They don't have to pay for lunch. They just have to find a way to cover dinner, meals on the weekends. And so that child would not be food insecure. And then also you have federal programs like WIC, TANF, Medicaid. It's the same. Oftentimes those supplemental programs are what are keeping someone from being food insecure. So what does it look like then in the educational environment? Well, Rodney Bivens, who is our founder, would often say that learning begins when hunger ends. And that's because a child who's food insecure is likely to struggle in school due to a variety of factors. Many of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with physiological needs being the base of the pyramid, and that you can't really progress through the pyramid until those physiological needs are met. And food is one of the biggest ones. If you can imagine a child that shows up to school not having had dinner, is not going to be able to eat until lunch because the school doesn't participate in breakfast in the classroom or breakfast after the bell or breakfast before the bell for that matter, that child isn't going to be thinking about anything but their rumbling stomach until lunchtime hits. And then after lunch, they're going to begin to think to themselves, I'm going to be full for a little while, but I'm not going to be able to eat once I go home. And so that kid is going to become a distracted, child inside of your learning environment. Also, if you'll stop and think about the fact that a child that isn't taking in the right kinds of nutrients inside of their body, typically they're not going to be healthy. And so there's going to be excessive absences due to illness. I'm not talking about the common cold. I'm talking about children that you see that are constantly out because there is a situation where they've got an extended cold, a virus constantly. They've got persistent headaches. They're having persistent issues with their stomach. Oftentimes, these are children. They may have chronic illnesses, but a lot of times those things are related directly to hunger. One of the other things we see that creates a barrier to education is also slow development. Kids have to have nutrients to see their brains develop. Those of us who are in education have had to go through child development classes, and you know that certain nutrients are needed at certain times in order to help the brain develop. And a child that doesn't have access to those things, they're going to experience slow development. They're going to experience learning delays. And all of that is often linked to a lack of nutrition. And then more than anything, we see the shame. A child that doesn't have enough to eat, particularly once they move beyond kindergarten, first, second, third grade, becomes very aware that they're very different from the majority of their peers. A child that's food insecure experiences shame. And they don't just experience shame because they don't have enough to eat. They experience shame because of what they have to do and go through in order to be able to access that food. Oftentimes, the process that someone has to go through in order to receive relief from hunger is an incredibly undignified and dehumanizing process. And that can be experienced by adults, but it's experienced by kids as well. So when we start looking at food insecurity in Oklahoma children, I will go ahead and point out, I've already mentioned free and reduced price lunch, and not every child who's on free and reduced price lunch is food insecure, but I want you to take a look at this statistic. We have 405,000, just over, children on free and reduced price lunch in Oklahoma. And yet we estimate that 213,000 children in our state are food insecure. So you can see right there that not every kid that's on free and reduced price lunch is qualified as food insecure. And I'm going to give you another really interesting fact about free and reduced. You have to qualify for it based on income. And many children in Oklahoma that are food insecure, they don't qualify for free or reduced price lunch. Their parents may both be working, but because of economic issues that may not be visible on a tax return or on a pay stub, these are kiddos that are going home and they're not able to access good, healthy food. And so they may not qualify for free and reduced price lunch. They may be paying full price for lunch or bringing lunch from home. But the truth of the matter is that they are food insecure. And that's what's really scary in a lot of cases when we start looking at those situations where kids are food insecure and it's not easily noticed. It's made that much more complicated by the new face of hunger in America, particularly for children. Those of us who are in education and in business right now, we have this idea in our minds of what hunger looks like. And it's based off of some really good things. I blame We Are the World and Michael Jackson for putting it into our minds because we picture a child that is hungry as an emaciated child with a bloated belly, flies crawling all over their face, because we grew up with We Are the World and all of the commercials about the poor, starving children in Africa and in South America that just need us to give them some money to have something to eat. And that's kind of the vision that we've got in our mind, is we're going to be able to identify children very easily as hungry, impoverished, food insecure, because they're going to be skinny. Well, Bill Ludwig, who's the Southwest Regional Director for the United States Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services, say that 3 times fast. I will decline personally. At a Share Our Strength conference 5 or 6 years ago, talked to us about what the new face of hunger in America is. And it is not an emaciated child with a bloated belly. It's an obese child. And that comes down largely to what we are eating and what we have access to be able to eat. But stop and think about it. The majority of our kids that are food insecure, when they do get a chance to eat, are going to gorge because all that food is right there in front of them. And typically the things that they're eating and consuming and gorging on are cheap foods that are high in calories and high in preservatives. It means it's going to stay in their bodies for a lot longer, but it's going to produce rushes and crashes. One of the things we see a lot of times as a kid that we envision sitting around watching a TV or playing a video game or playing on their phone for long periods of time. And we say, you need to get outside and go play. But the truth of the matter is, for so many kids who are food insecure, the energy is just not there. And the reason for that is what they've eaten all day has been largely sugar and carbs. And those foods tend to stay in our bodies, but they don't produce large quantities of energy beyond their initial consumption. And so you have a kid that's bringing in a large amount of calories that then don't have the energy to burn it off because of the way that food is processed inside of our bodies. And if you stop and think about kids that live in high poverty areas, they also tend to live in low access areas. Now, a lot has been made in the last several months in Oklahoma City about this idea of a food desert. We've heard that term thrown around by politicians and focused it largely on Northeast Oklahoma City because of the grocery store that was over there that was closing. Those of you who don't live in Oklahoma City that are listening or that will listen, I know that doesn't relate directly to you, but I hope this next part does. What we do have in that part of Oklahoma City is a food desert, but it is also a food swamp. And food swamp is not an in vogue term. I'm sure someone will pick it up at some point in time. It'll be the new call to arms to try to fix everything in America when it comes to nutrition and hunger. But let me go ahead and get out ahead of the curve and tell you what a food swamp is. It's an area where all of the food access is largely unhealthy. So if you drive over into parts of town where there is not a lot of industry, there's not a lot of wealth, what you will often find is a lot of convenience stores. And if you go inside of those convenience stores, what do you find? Well, you might find a little food hut that's selling fried burritos and fried chicken strips and French fries and all kinds of other stuff, all the things that I really like to eat but are not really, really good for me. You'll also find rows and rows and rows of discounts on chips, 79-cent big gulp soft drinks, all these different things that are high in calories. And if you're a parent who's cash strapped and you have 2 hungry kids in the back of your car and you know that you've only got $5 to spend, you're not going to go to the grocery store because there probably isn't one close by and pick up some produce because that would be expensive anyhow. But you can stop at the corner store or you can stop at the fast food place and get the 2 for $5 deal and cut that up and feed it to your kids. And what we're doing in that particular case is we're creating a bunch of kids that are food insecure, but they look like they're well fed and they're not. And so when we start looking at solutions for children inside of the schoolhouse and after school as an organization, and really truthfully as a group of people who are engaged in trying to address poverty, we have to think about more than calories. We have to think about what are we providing for children that is not just going to fill their bellies, but is going to set them up for success inside or outside of the educational environment. I'll give you an example before I go on of exactly what I'm talking about the extent of the food swamp. We run a program that I'll talk about here in a few minutes in the summertime called Summer Feeding. And we partner with churches and community organizations and parks and rec sites, different things like that. And about 6 years ago, shortly into my tenure with the regional food bank, I went out to do some visits to some of these sites. And I took our, at that time, executive director, Rodney Bivens, along with me. Rodney's a grandfatherly looking guy, got a gray beard, glasses. He looks like the kind of guy you'd want to hang around with. Great storyteller, all this fun stuff. And we pull into this parks and rec site in the downtown area of Oklahoma City. And we go inside. And the food bank had gotten access to peaches that year that we had been able to glean. And so we added them as an additional bonus item inside of our lunch sacks that we used at that point in time. And we go in and it's time for the kids to eat. And Rodney and I are talking to the site director. And one of the little girls, beautiful little 8-9-year-old girl, pulls a peach out of her bag and is holding it in her hand and says the following: "What's this?" And Rodney, like I say, grandfatherly guy, goes over, gets down on one knee next to her and goes, "Well, sweetheart, that's a peach." And she looks him dead in the eye, I promise to goodness, and says the following: "That's not a peach. Peaches come in cans with syrup, and they're orange." And it just struck all of us in there. This child had never seen a peach in its raw form. And several other kids, there were probably close to 20 kids in there, several other kids that were in there had never seen a raw peach. Now, I grew up in East Texas, y'all. My granny went to the farmer's market, got peaches, and came home and made peach cobbler all the time. I knew what a raw peach looked like from the time I was 4 years old. This child had never seen one. So many other kids in there, in some cases 9, 10, 11 years old, never seen one. We had to have a peach eating class. We had to talk about why you didn't eat the pit of the peach. And some of y'all are laughing right now or will be laughing because you're like, how in the world? But it's because children are growing up in situations where they've never seen healthy food. They've never seen fresh food. And so we start talking about the solutions, and I'm fixing to kind of walk through. I want you to keep in mind that what we're trying to do for children is we're trying to provide for them, once again, not just calories, but things that are good for them, and trying to expand their minds so when they're in the position of being able to buy, purchase, they'll think, maybe I ought to go try to find that raw peach. So first of all, let's talk about school-based solutions. So we have two. One of them is probably the most famous of our program. It's called the Backpack Program. It's been around for 16 years. It's a partnership with elementary schools where a child every Friday receives a backpack full of good food that they can take home and they can eat. It's designed really truthfully, roughly to replace school-based breakfast and school-based lunch for a child who's food insecure, because we're hoping that that child is accessing that program Monday through Friday, and so we're trying to supplement Saturday and Sunday. That started because the food bank was notified by an Oklahoma City public school that they had a child pass out on the lunch line, and when that child was on a Monday morning, when that child was revived, they found out that that kid had only had a single hot dog with no bun to eat from the time he left school lunch on Friday. And we said we cannot allow that to happen. We will put this into practice. We had 11 schools initially. Last year we had almost 480. We cover all 53 counties of our service area. There is a similar program that exists on the east side of the state based out of the Community Food Bank of Eastern Oklahoma. Inside of that backpack, you'll get things like milk, low-fat pudding. You'll get beef sticks that are donated by the FFA. Actually, they donate the animals, and we process them and create the beef sticks. You'll have fruit, not with syrup, and other different items and things like that that are put together. Each sack weighs about 2.5 to 3 pounds, so it's easily taken home by a 5-year-old all the way up to a kid that's in 5th grade. And we have this program that's been available, and any elementary school that's in our service area is more than welcome to participate and partner in that program. We'll talk in a few minutes about how you identify a kid who's food insecure, but we ask that, like we say, that doesn't go out to every single kid that's on free and reduced price lunch. We ask that you participate with us in identifying children who are food insecure. The other program we have is the school pantry program, and that is for middle schools and high schools. That program is a little younger. It's only about 8 years old now, and it was started because we finally came to this realization that should have hit us from Jump Street, that just because you leave elementary school doesn't mean you're not hungry when you go home over the weekend. And it came about because of a partnership with Putnam City West High School. High school football coach called us and said, we've got a real problem here at Putnam City West. He had played 6 football games. He'd had 7 broken bones. That never happens. In high school football, you may have 1 broken bone in the course of an entire year. And so as he began to talk to his players, he figured out they were malnourished. And so this football coaches started putting together peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and feeding kids and trying to give them a little bit more nutrition. And they thought they were doing a pretty good job until a couple of weeks after the season, when one of their best players, a kid with a great reputation, good citizen, good grades, walks in and says, "Coach, I need to talk to you." Coach said, what's going on? He says, "I almost robbed a 7-Eleven this morning." "What are you talking about? Why would you do something like that?" And the response was, "I'm hungry. And I knew if I robbed a 7-Eleven, I could get some money, I could get something to eat, and I'd be able to be taken care of. And if I got caught, I could go to juvie, and I could get 3 meals a day." So they started the very first school pantry program. Last year we had almost 180 of those. We're continuing to add those programs, and we set them up on a campus, and they do not run like the backpack program. People that run school pantries are able to order out of our inventory, whereas the backpack program is pre-bagged. School pantries are set up where the site coordinator has more control, and they can order things that fit what works for their kids in their school. Some of the people that are listening to this may say, "Well, I don't have enough space." The truth of the matter is, I've seen them run out of closets. You don't have to set it up in a classroom if you don't have a classroom for kids to be able to walk through. You can store it in a closet, put bags together once a week, and distribute them to kids. And we do realize that in a school pantry situation, the kids may be taking them home and sharing it with their families. And you know what? Completely and totally okay with that. In fact, that's not a bad idea. And we'll be talking a little bit about some different resources for families. But the truth of the matter is, in some of our communities, the school pantry is probably the best resource for families, whether we like it or not, because of the situation we exist in with just the spread of our population across our state. So those are school-based programs. They're available completely and totally free to schools inside of our 53 county service area. You do not pay for them. And the truth of the matter is, we fundraise for them. Our donors receive reports. They don't get names of kids. They like to know how many kids are being served. They like to know how many visits were made to a school pantry. But they're not getting names of kids. And the truth of the matter is, these are the situations in the schools where we worry about shame the most. And so we encourage sites that are running backpack and school pantry programs to keep them as anonymous as possible. We have some after school programs as well, because the truth of the matter is, hunger does not end when school is over with. In no way, shape, or form does that happen. And so our after school programs are actually federally funded, and we're pretty excited about that. They run through a program called CACFP. That's a Child and Adult Care Food Program, and it runs fairly similar to National School Breakfast or School Lunch. There are nutrition guidelines that have to be met. There are monitoring requirements. There are certain things that have to be done that are set down by the State Department of Education, which is the pass-through. So we're incredibly thankful to them for their partnership in that. We have about 40 kids cafes that are active, and we're currently adding them. And you may say, well, who could be a kids cafe? And the answer to that question is pretty much anyone that's in an area that qualifies. Qualification for CACFP funding is based on free and reduced price lunch rate in your school. So if your school's at 50% or higher, any site that's in that area, a church, an after-school program, a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club, a community center, could potentially qualify to be a kids cafe. There are some requirements that are put on there. They're all federal requirements, things that the SDE has to enforce and we have to enforce. That includes you have to keep a roster, you have to keep track of the meals that are served, and the meals have to be served in a time frame. That all the components have to be served in order for the meal to qualify. But the good news is this: we do all the hard work. We deliver the food. We deliver the meals prepackaged, everything ready to rock and roll and go. We deliver the milk. Sometimes it's fresh, sometimes it's shelf stable, depending on your location and our suppliers in that area. And you get a chance to serve the meal. And when you do that, you send us information via a digital program that gives us real-time information. And at the end of every month, we file the claim. You're out, no money. We do that, and we recoup the reimbursement, and that's what enables us to cover the food. It's pretty fantastic. We take care of everything except for providing the volunteers or the paid staff. That's up to you. So we're always looking to add more kids cafes. And I know you're saying, well, you guys are based in Oklahoma City. Where in the world would you go? Well, I'm working on putting one in Guyman right now. So if you're if you're further away than Guyman, then that means you're in Goodwell, and I'm working on putting one there too. And if you're further along than that, it means you're in Boise City. And if you're in Boise City and you want to put a kids cafe out there, you give me a holler, because the truth of the matter is, we want to feed kids, and I don't care where you are. We'll work with you. So there's a sister program to CACFP. It's called SFSP. That's the Summer Food Service Program. Runs very similar to CACFP, has a few differences as far as the meal patterns and the record keeping goes, but it still has to be meals have to be served in a certain pattern, have to be served in a certain time frame. Records have to be kept about how many kids are served, but we run them in the summer. And in the summer, I've got a lot more flexibility. I can do breakfast, I can do lunch, I can do snacks. There's a couple of deals. I can't do a lunch and a dinner at the same place in the same day, but we run those all across our service area. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but Oklahoma is 51st in the nation in participation in this program. And we've been working really closely with the State Department of Education to close that gap for the last 6 or 7 years. And we're making some huge gains. And one of the reasons why is because we have 121 sites participating in that program last summer. And I'm always looking for more. That's why I do webinars like this, because I get a chance to talk to potential partners that are out there and say, hey, if you're interested in partnering, we'd love to visit with you. Because the truth of the matter is, we want to do as many of these as possible, because there are kids in counties that do not even have this program in the summertime. My friends over at the Community Food Bank in Eastern Oklahoma and Tulsa also do summer feeding, and they'd love to visit with you as well if you're in the counties that they serve. They serve the 24 counties on the eastern side of the state, and I serve the 53 in central and western part of the state. Once again, it's anybody. We do them in parks, splash pads, swimming pools, any places where kids are gathering. We're happy and excited to be able to do that in the summertime, to be able to provide nutrition for kids. So those are a lot of resources that are available for kids. And in the message bar right now, I'm going to go ahead and put a website that is the food bank's website, but with a link to our Get Help app. You can go to get help, regionalfoodbank.org, www.regionalfoodbank.org/get-help. You click on that link or type in that web address, and what will pop up is it'll ask you for your zip code. And if you type in your zip code and set a mileage radius, 5, 10, I think it goes up to 25, it will tell you every agency that partners with the regional food bank that is in that geographic area from that center. So it's 5 miles out from a center, or 10 or whatever. It'll give you the operating hours of that agency. It'll tell you the name. It'll give you a phone number. That is a great way to be able to provide for more than just children, but for families, because our food pantries are there and available to serve families. They have requirements. Each one is a little bit different, but they are all non-discrimination, civil rights following. They follow all the USDA rules, all that fun stuff, where you're able to go in and be served. And if you're working with a family and you know they're struggling and you know that they need help, that is a great way to help not just a child, but a family. I say all that because the truth of the matter is the other reason why I love doing webinars like this is it gives me a chance to explain how you can help, how you can partner with us. And there's my slide advance. I'm clicking here and it wasn't happening. I thought I was fixing to have to call in Gary and get him to come help me, but I'm good to go now. How can you help? Well, the first thing is you can be aware what programs are available in your school. Does your school have a backpack program if you're in elementary school? Does it have a school pantry if you're at a middle school or high school or an alternative school? And if the answer is no, then the next question you need to ask yourself is, why not? Why don't we have one? And I always suggest people start with their principal. And if you don't get any love from your principal on it, talk to your superintendent or talk to your next level liaison and say, hey, we need this here. And because the truth of the matter is there's a lot of schools that do. I will not name the school, but there was a school in the Oklahoma City metro area several years ago. That was one of our last holdouts. They did not want to participate. They were concerned with the stigma of participating because of where they were located. And they had a poverty rate in their neighborhood that was over 60%. And there were kids from that neighborhood that were going to that school. When they finally agreed to participate in one of our school-based programs, and I'm going to tell you which one, because I know some of y'all are going, I'm trying to narrow down who this is. Don't do that. That's not fun. That's not fair. They had 20 kids that were referred by teachers or staff within the very first day. The kids that were there were hungry, and people knew it. Don't let stigma keep you as a principal, as a teacher, as a counselor from participating in one of these programs. Then beyond that, you need to ask yourself the question, what are the resources available in my community? What are the after-school programs? What are the summer programs? What food pantries and different agencies like that are available? But beyond that, where would I send somebody to sign up to participate in a federal program like SNAP? Where's the local WIC office? That type of stuff will go a long way towards helping alleviate food insecurity inside of your school. Then the other thing you can do is you can know the signs. And I try to distill these down to 4 different areas. The first one is, look, there are some obvious signs of hunger. And yes, it is really truthfully no longer a child with sticks for arms and legs with a distended belly. But children that have dark circles underneath their eyes, children that have protruding collarbones, because we tend to lose weight when we're having trouble, we're not getting enough food from the upper part of our bodies first. That's why I look like I'm skinny, because my face is skinny, but the rest of me, not so much. So you can't see that because you're listening to a webinar and not watching me on camera. Look for those kinds of signs. But here's the thing, don't just look for physical signs. Look for a kid that hangs out by the trash can when lunch is over with and watches for kids that are getting ready to throw away things that are uneaten or unopened and stuffs them in their pockets. Watch for the kid who is hanging out during the class party to see if there's the leftover cupcake or there's leftover food on the share table if you do a share table for breakfast or lunch at school, that's scooping up all those leftovers, putting them in their backpack to take home. Those are kids that are displaying obvious signs of hunger. Here's another one. Listen. Listen for the kid that's constantly asking the question, you got anything to eat? Hey, teacher, do you have anything that you have a snack? Hey, teacher, I skipped breakfast because mom woke me up late. Every single day. Listen for signs of kids that are trying to barter for larger quantities of food or asking kids if they're going to eat things that are left over on their trays. Listen for kids that are not talking about what they ate over the weekend. Because oftentimes kids will be like, oh, I ate this, or we went to a barbecue or whatever. And then there's that one kid that's sitting there looking longingly, wishing they had participated or paid attention. Here's the third one. Take note. And this is the one where it is often harder, because sometimes kids that are food insecure are sending out subtle physical cues beyond just hanging out by the garbage can or the share table. And I'll give you the most obvious one that you may not think is the most obvious, and it may actually explain the worst behaved kid in your class. Take note of the kid that comes to class every morning and can't seem to sit still. It's constantly causing a problem. It's constantly talking to people, poking people, antagonizing people, but who then calms down after lunch. Take note of the kid whose grades are really bad in their first hours before lunch, or first classes or lessons before lunch, and whose grades significantly improve after lunch. That is one of the main signs of a child who is not getting enough to eat. And if you'll stop and think about it, the reason's obvious. What do you do when you're hungry? You try to distract yourself. That's the reason why some of us chew gum or smoke or do other things that are unhealthy for us when we miss a meal. We're trying to distract ourselves or push down from the fact that we're hungry until we can get to the next place where we're able to eat. Well, a child doesn't have that option. We won't let them chew gum in school, and they're not old enough to puff on a cigarette to be able to tamp down their hunger. And so what are they doing? They're fidgeting. Why? That physical movement, that physical motion, that bothering somebody, that getting somebody to talk to them takes their mind off the fact that they're hungry. They're not going to be able to sit down and do math problems because that's a still activity. And while they're sitting there trying to figure out what 3 times 2 divided by 6 is, their stomach is growling. The last one is that I would say is take action. That's preemptive action. One of the things particularly that I love about Oklahoma, and I'm from Texas originally, so pardon me, but I've noticed and that I love about Oklahoma is this. We're really neighborly. We have a pretty good sense of what's going on in the families that we're around and that we're with. And particularly in our smaller towns, everybody kind of knows what's going on. So if you hear about a mom or a dad being laid off, don't wait for the child to pass out in the lunch line. Assume that that family might need a little bit of assistance for a season, and take the action of picking up the phone and calling the family that may have never needed to ask for help before and letting them know what is available. They may be too proud to take advantage of it the first week or the second week, but if the layoff lasts a long time, or if the change is permanent, like in a divorce or the kid's going to live with the grandparents, they may eventually break down and say, yeah, we'll participate, we'll partner. Thank you very much for helping my child. Because the truth of the matter is this. Most people, adults, parents, grandparents, they'll be happy to go hungry, but they don't want their kids to suffer. And when you as an educator is willing to step in and say, we can keep this discreet, we can keep this quiet, but this is a way I can help, they may grudgingly or they may gratefully accept the help, because they don't want their child to suffer because of what they feel like they're not doing to be able to take care of their kiddo. So I'm going to put my name and contact information up here, so it'll be recorded on the webinar and be available. That means you're all going to be able to get a hold of me, because that line right there, that one rings at my desk. I don't have a secretary, administrative assistant, or any way to duck or dodge your calls. And the truth of the matter is I love my job, and I love being able to help kids in Oklahoma, and educators and parents and volunteers in Oklahoma be able to get some help. So Patricia, you're my one listener, and you ought to get some credit for showing up. So if you've got a question, my friend, I know you don't have a mic, I'll wait a minute or so for you to type it in. If you don't, then I'll be happy to allow Gary to bring this to a dignified end, and be thankful for the fact that other people will listen to it and reach out and be willing to partner with us to help kiddos. Patricia is not typing. I think we're good. Thank y'all very much for tuning in. Appreciate my friends at the at Alternative Education here, the State Department of Ed, for inviting me to come in. I absolutely love working with this committee and this group because you guys are on the front lines of doing some of the best work in the state. So God bless you guys. Thank you very much. Thanks, Patricia. I hope everyone else does get to listen. You have a great day.